it change blocks the truth, here's people who try to show him. Creates an echo chamber for himself to reinforce his fantasy. He used to believe in something, what happened? Mills for liberty. Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. A Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality. He's totally lost in what can we do? But mock him relentlessly. It's not a Gnostic sex cult, James. No, it's not. Stop lying to your audience. No, it's not. It's not a Gnostic change. Get a grip, Mary Nardini tells us queer liberation means the annihilation of capitalism. Catch up, James. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. Whoa. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's capitalism. To pocket all that money from the mills for liberty. The left hates capitalism, but James won't admit it. He refuses to believe queer theory stabilizes normativity. The gender binary and the nuclear family. But James blocks the truth, smears people who try to show him. Creates an echo chamber for himself to reinforce his fantasy. Is to believe in something. What happens for liberty? Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. The Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality. He's totally lost it. What can we do but mock him relentlessly?
Hello, fellow Gnostic sex cultists. Welcome to The Cult. This is a show that I stream Monday through Friday on YouTube, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and on Rumble, where we talk about all aspects of the culture war, but really we tend to focus on deep dives into far-left activists. We watch trainings from all the real far-left socialists that are forcing every crazy idea on us today, and I'm especially excited because we have a great guest coming on today who has got an awesome book coming out, and I'm really anxious to hear some of his information about his research into the hidden history of communist revolutions and how you can fight back against them. I just think it's going to be a beautiful marriage of kind of a couple different perspectives on how to fight back against the left, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to bring him on in a second, but first I just want to let you know, if you do want to get a hold of that song we played on the intro that is called Gnostic Sex Cult in honor of our favorite person, James Lindsay, who refuses to say the word capitalism. You can actually find it for download on Spotify and on iTunes. And you can also go over to the Unwoke Underground website, where we are making all sorts of amazing Unwoke propaganda that you can download. Not only the music, but we've got the zine project going, where you can go and download zines that look a little bit like this, print them off, and then they're meant to look a little socialist. And then when you go to that QR code, it actually has more information about socialism and all the ways it's showing up in the world. We are actively printing that stuff off and going into coffee shops, going onto college campuses, going into all the places where people put this type of information, getting our literature out there. There is a whole bunch of stuff in there that you can download under the flyers section that all just looks really, really, really cool. And all of this is available to download for you. You can do whatever you want with it. We just ask you don't change the format of it or edit it or anything, but you can print them off, make make stickers, make t-shirts, make flyers, make whatever you want. Lots of great stuff on there. Of course, you can also head over to the Unwoke art store where we've got some of this up on t-shirts and other merch where you can buy some sweet merch, which also does support the work I'm doing. Remember, if you spend more than $100 or more in the Unwoke Art store for the rest of the month of May, which isn't too long, and you use the promo code REDMAY, all one word, REDMAY, you will get 25% off your order. And of course, always remember to head over to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. This is where I put basically all my best stuff on the internet. And right now on the homepage, we have the link to my 4-hour on-demand class, How to Speak Socialist. So if you want a crash course in socialist language and maybe you're new to me and you're just finding me because of this interview or you're new to my channel, I basically sit here and I watch socialist trainings all day, every day, and I have amassed a massive archive of clips of the far left telling us exactly what they believe, exactly what they're doing, exactly what their definitions of words are, and I have put all my best clips into a 4-hour training to give you the ultimate crash course in what the far left is doing in this country, from critical race theory to gender ideology to attacks on parental rights to abolish the police to the college protests. You will find all of it broken down in a way that is very easy to understand, and guess what, guys? You never have to take my word for anything because I always come with receipts. You will be able to watch far left activists tell you themselves what they're doing, why they're doing it, because if we do not understand our enemy, we cannot defeat them. And speaking of understanding our enemy, that is where our guest today comes in. And I have to admit, I said this last week when I told you guys I was going to have him on the channel. Jack and Joshua, for their new book, Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them, possibly are the only people that are talking about communism on the internet that have better branding than I do. I'm really jealous of the design of this book. I just think it's a really cool concept. And so I think it looks great. And I'm really excited to read it when it comes out. But guess what? We're going to get a little sneak preview today because we are bringing Joshua Lisec on the channel, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the book, and he's going to be taking your questions about what you need to know to fight back against communists in America. If you want to buy the book, you can head over to unhumansbook.com. The link is in the description below. I will also pop the direct link in the chat for you so you can get an autographed copy of that from them, which is really, really great. And we also want to do a shout out to Jack Posobiec, who is using Stony Baloney's tweets, or his memes rather, about the Gnostic sex cult. And we're really excited about that. Stony Baloney is, of course, Human Centipede in the chat. And so we're really appreciative of all the great work he does. Well, guys, without further ado, welcome Joshua to the channel. We're so glad you're here.
Carlyn, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about your book. I know we're all really excited to read it.
Is it all right with you if I read the opening salvo?
Yeah, please.
Okay. This is the introduction. Petty Resentment and Cruelty. Unhumans by Joshua and by Jack. This is not a book about communist ideology. You've read those. This is a book about the communist reality and how to tell when it's coming to a society near you. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. For as long as there have been beauty and truth, love and life, there have also been the ugly liars who hate and kill. This is the way of things in all things. There's light and there's dark. Always has been, always will be. Civilization is the superstructure built on law and order that keeps the petty, the resentful, and the cruel away from the rest of us. Some societies have been better at this than others. Those who fail at repelling the repulsive fall to unhumanity, to a state of affairs in which human thriving is impossible and surviving improbable. Introduction of Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them. Out July 2nd.
I absolutely love it. And I love how you guys are approaching this in a little bit more of an artful way. I mean, I think one of the things that really bothers me sometimes about how the right approaches discussing communists is they just do it, they do it in a way that's a little bit dry. And it seems like you guys are just taking a little bit of a different approach to it. I also really like and responded very well to the fact that this is a book about not just learning about things, but getting out there and doing something about it. And one of my continual frustrations with conservatives, and this has been true over the past 4 years that I've been interacting with them, is that they talk a lot, but then when push comes to shove, they don't actually go out there and do anything to solve the problem. And so I think the problem with communism specifically in the United States has gotten so bad just because we have allowed it to happen through our own inaction. And so you guys are actually encouraging people to, kind of, still do the tweets, that's fine, but get out into the world and actually fight back in a real way too.
Yes, that's right. I believe it was Stony Baloney, aka Human Centipede, had actually read Humans in Advanced Coffee over this past week.
Excellent.
And if I may quote you, one of the things that you said, friend, is you pointed out that this is not a book on theory; it's a book for soccer moms. This is
Perfect.
it's not another podcast. Okay, let's learn all of the terms. So this is about the Frankfurt School, and let's learn all the names, and let's remember all the dates and the places. Okay, here's postmodernism, and this is the difference between Marxism and Leninism. Nobody cares.
Right.
Nobody cares.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, we're undergoing an irregular communist revolution in Western civilization.
Mhm.
We borrow existing terminology that helps us put a frame around what's going on. Because when we look at why is it good to be a Democrat in law and the justice system, why are Democrats treated differently from Republicans every single time? Why is, let's say, the word black have to be capitalized but not white,
Mhm.
according to the Associated Press and publishers? I get in trouble because I'm a professional ghostwriter, and proofreaders always whine at me saying I'm not following the rules and whatnot. Why do the border forces welcome illegal immigrants who are probably not even from, in many cases, Central America? Why does that happen? Why? I mean, the list can go on of all these issues that are the new outrage of the day. And what we do is we set a complete frame around all of them using the military terminology of gray zone warfare,
Okay.
irregular warfare, which is when you want to create socio-political change through military, but you don't want to get into trouble and get a militaristic response. So China, for example, is waging gray zone warfare against the United States. Russia has been waging gray zone warfare against the United States as well. Well, the left and the various factions of them, as not necessarily just institutions, but through those who resonate with resentment. If you remember that, resonance
Mhm.
with resentment. That is the left in all of the institutions and networks. And what do they resent? They resent beauty. They resent joy. They resent white people. They resent being straight. They resent civilization and the history of civilization and the heritage of civilization. They resent it for one reason or another. Some cases it's they lost the genetic lottery or it was just plain bad luck. But what we also do in the book, besides explain how best to view the comprehensive landscape of outrages through the frame of an irregular communist revolution, where it's not literally people waving red flags in the streets all the time. It's sometimes a micro revolution that targets a specific person, where the mob is not riled up to storm the palace. And the mob is riled up to storm someone's social media and get them debanked and deplatformed. That is a micro
Mhm.
revolution concept. And so, as far as we know, Jack and I are the lone figures on the right who are tying all of these things together into a historical frame, because there are people who are exposing what's happening now. But this has been going on for 250 years. And so we
Mhm.
look at, well, what exactly happened in France for their proto-communist uprising? 4 times. By the way, there wasn't just the one French Revolution. There were multiple revolutions. There was the Haitian Revolution. And when you look at what actually happened in the slave revolt, it was never about freedom and equality. It was, I want to be your master now, is what
Mhm.
the former slaves said of the white French settlers that they were killing or wanted to kill. They didn't want freedom or equality. They wanted to be the master now. That is the oppressor versus oppressed model that is taught in the Communist Manifesto. So we do quote here in places and point these things out. But more important than theory is practice. What do they actually do? And also, what do they do prior? Another military doctrine that we've repurposed for the book is called the Operational Preparation of the Environment, OPE. And it's a way that spies to special forces help prepare the environment where battle is going to be fought. How do they make it such that it's likely to win without ever fighting? How do they almost guarantee victory before the battle is fought, before the enemy even knows there's a battle going to be fought? So how do communists engage in, or leftists, socialists, progressives, genderqueer theorists, whatever they want to call themselves, whatever ism or ist, what is the OPE that they engage in that results in a continual string, a perpetual string of defeats in the culture war and economy, immigration, and so on for the normal, everyday, average person?
You are so speaking my language, like you don't even understand it. I just want to confirm that Human Centipede, who of course is Stony Baloney over on Twitter, he says he's halfway through the book and it's really good. His 8th grader can understand it, which I know when Human Centipede found my channel, this was very important to him because he had been listening to James Lindsay's content for years and he couldn't understand it and he certainly couldn't explain it to his 8th grader. And like, so finding those resources that are simple and easy to understand is really important to him. And I think that's important to a lot of people. It's not that people are stupid. It's that they're busy and they can't spend a lot of time doing this stuff. So we have to make it simple for them. And he says it's actionable too. So those are all words of praise. And I think that, you know, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about looking at all the historical revolutions and you know, trying to find ways to, you know, like frameworks that you can ascertain from those. I was thinking recently about covering the campus protests. And one of the very first things we did when the encampment started popping up is we went back and we watched a documentary about Kent State, because I'm absolutely convinced that the students are trying to recreate Kent State. I think that's what the students at Columbia wanted. You know, thank God that there wasn't an incident where someone got shot, but they were really trying. And I think when you really get into this stuff and you start digging into the actions of today's activists and how they're actually operating and coordinating, and they have this massive decentralized network, it starts to make you go back and kind of like unravel different points of history to say, was this just an attempt at a communist revolution then? Was the same thing happening then? Was the same thing happening when the protests in the war of Vietnam were coming up? And you start to see that these patterns are the same throughout basically the entire time since the Frankfurt School has come to the United States, in terms of how these far left activists have utilized dissent and crisis to advance a far left ideology right under all of our noses, without people being able to pick up on it because they didn't know the language, they didn't know the signs, they didn't know what to look for. But now we have the benefit of hindsight and can go back and say, oh, now I understand what I'm looking at.
Exactly. Yes. And it also makes the past, which is old and boring in school and facts and figures, it makes it relevant again. And where we can look to the past to find out about the present and the future, which is really the purpose of effective historical nonfiction. Historical nonfiction is notoriously difficult to write and to commercialize, because it's the past, it's not the present. So from a professional persuasion perspective, which is what I do as a ghostwriter, is professional persuasion for hire, like persuasion hitman for hire, right? How do you work in urgency? How do you work in excitement, desire for knowledge on the topic? There are tens of thousands of books on communist revolutions and uprising, both generally, like about the ideology and the uprisings, the facts and the figures and what exactly happened and who all was involved. And nobody wants to read that. Sorry, nobody wants to read that. What do people want to read? What people do want to read is what affects them right now. It's moments when little Johnny comes home from school and says to soccer mom, my best friend Danny wore a dress to school today. That's what's relevant. Not what's the difference between the Trotskyites and the Leninists.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. People can't even spell Trotsky. And again, it's not for a lack of intelligence or learnedness. It's time. It's understanding what's going on. But if you have a limited perspective to, well, the teacher said this one thing, and there was this book about being genderqueer and being non-binary and non-presenting as masculinity and trans-feminine. What? These sorts of leftist language is being pumped into families. and there doesn't seem to be any precedent for it. How do you respond to it? You don't necessarily know. But it's when you zoom out from that one little incident that is kind of your red pill moment. Get it, huh? Red, the reds, haha. Okay.
Mhm.
It's your reds pilling moment, we're going to call it. If you zoom out to the fact that this is one little plot point in a quarter of a millennium old story, that if we're explaining it as simply as we can, it is civilization against anti-civilization. It is progress versus entropy. It is humans versus unhumans. And by the way, unhuman is a real word. And the Southern Poverty Law Center flipped their whistle at Jack and I when we first announced the book. And they said, so you're calling us unhumans now? Which is ironic because when we introduced the book, we described that, we defined it as a verb. To unhuman someone is to deprive them of their rights to life, liberty, and property. So the SPLC immediately identified with that and said, oh, that's us. He's talking about us. That's offensive.
That's projection, isn't it?
Yeah, that's called it's, we do a little telling on ourselves, which is typical for that. They can't help themselves, but they don't need to help themselves because they have positions of power. They have infiltrated successfully these institutions, and we talk about that in the book. And we look at how did, prior to the Spanish Civil War, for example, how did the Soviets infiltrate the Spanish socialist movement, workers' movement, literally? How did that take place? What are the parallels to today? What lessons can we learn? What lessons can we take away? Speaking of Franco's Civil War, one of the key lessons is from a book that was published in 1958, and we quote it, called Communist Socialist Propaganda in American Schools. 1958, a fellow named Vern P. Cobb. He figured this out. He saw it coming. And he pointed out that a tactic of the communist revolutionary is to look at those people who are effective at anti-communist strategy and tactics and call them what, Garland? What do you call them?
Racist. Fascists. Yes.
You call them nationalists. You call them far right, but the favorite word is fascist.
Okay.
And that, of course, is how we introduce Francisco Franco in the chapter on the Spanish Civil War. Because you Google anything about him now, and it's Nazi, 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 Nazi adjacent, Nazi adjacent, Nazi adjacent, Nazi adjacent. Look, here he is with Hitler. Look, guys, Mussolini. The salute, all this other stuff, right? And the swastikas are everywhere. And that, of course, is identical to when you look up George Washington. When you look at Thomas Jefferson, what do we find out? White supremacist Thomas Jefferson, slaveholder Thomas Jefferson, white supremacist George Washington. Oh, you realize it's the same tactic being done. Yep. Franco being a Washingtonian figure for Catholic Spain specifically, word thinking is in place of critical thinking, where, oh, Franco was a fascist. Oh, shoot, that's not good. Now, of course, in 40 years, Washington will be known as, unless we can stop this, white supremacist, George Washington. And words like insurrection come to define events such as January 6th. So if you, and you learn about this in professional hypnosis, which is some work that I do, where if you choose the words, you can choose the reality, because language is how we form reality personally and also a shared reality. And so if you want to alter history itself, you just choose different words. So when Franco, who, if you look at what literally happened, it was an armed resistance against anarchist socialist mobs, plundering Spanish churches and raping and murdering the nuns and priests. That is literally what happened. And Franco in general said, we can't stand for this. That's not on my watch. Franco said in English, wherever I am, there will be no communism. And so he and his forces engaged in an armed resistance against the government and against these mobs that were allowed to plunder and pillage and seize property and do what communists always do. And that has been turned into fascist Franco ran a military coup against the duly elected government. And so that is how it's defined. And so we have to reject the frame. We have to break that frame. We have to do a little frame smashing and talk about it differently. And when you do that, they lose their minds because they've
Oh,
been word thinking for so long. They just have a conniption fit, and it's hilarious. And I love it.
no, they absolutely do, and this is why we spend so much time watching their trainings on my channel, which some people might think it's, like, really boring to sit through so many hours of socialist training, and it can be, but we find these things like there was an actual Antifa conference at Hofstra University, like, a year and a half ago, and we
Nice.
watched a bunch of their presentations, and in the middle of one of their presentations, there was this economist speaking, and she was a professor at another college, I forget which one off the top of my head, but in the middle of her presentation, she goes on this whole diatribe about how fascism is actually defined as free market capitalism. And I was like, what? Like, say
Yeah.
that again, please. And they say this stuff, I mean, all the time. And it's like, you have to sit through a lot of boring stuff. But once you find those clips of them saying, like, we believe that capitalism created the gender binary, and that's what the patriarchy is. And we believe that the nuclear family upholds capitalism. And that's why we want to abolish it. And that's why they're attacking parental rights. And they'll flat out say F parental rights in relation to all of this. And when you show people these clips, they're like, all of a sudden, all of these words that they've been hearing and all of these crazy ideas, it kind of starts to make sense to them. The biggest
Mhm.
hurdle I have trouble teaching people is that the term whiteness is almost never a reference to skin color. It's always a reference to who owns the power structure, who is the bourgeois, who is the person that they want to usurp as, like, the dictatorship of the proletariat, stuff like that. So we say whiteness means capitalism, which sounds confusing to a lot of people, but once you understand it, you then start to see it everywhere. And I think that, I just love that you guys are kind of breaking this down for people as well to help people understand how it's showing up in the real world. Because what I found, and I don't know if you've had this experience, I didn't start watching socialist trainings because I thought I wanted to learn the language. I started watching them because I'm an organizational psychologist and I was trying to reverse engineer their trainings to figure out what they were teaching. But after about 3 years of watching them every day of my life, I became fluent in this language that I've called socialist. And once that happened, it started showing up everywhere for me, like, just everywhere in the real world. And this has happened to several members of my audience as well, where
Yeah.
all of a sudden you learn that your kid's teacher is speaking socialist to you, or this movie that you're watching that you just thought was normal like a year ago, now you understand how much the language is in it. And that's when you start to understand how pervasive and insidious this ideology is, because once they control the language, they control how we think, and that's ultimately how they win. Am I right
Exactly.
about that?
Yes. Yes, and it's in media, it's in education, it's all of the spheres of influence and the institutional industries where that oppressor versus oppressed mental model, we call it, because it's different. It's not, and this is where word thinking becomes unhelpful. Well, Marxism is about the proletariat class and the working class versus those who own the means of production, right? Well, that was communism is not a threat since the Cold War ended. That sort of mentality that some,
Yeah.
particularly boomers and Gen X, some Gen Xers on the right have, and even those normie millennials and younger who haven't been paying attention or have been watching the fake news in some way, shape, or form, and aren't familiar with the fact that it is about oppressor versus oppressed. And so everything is through the frame of oppressor evil, oppressed good. Now, we do go back and look at the Communist Manifesto because it was prescient for its time in describing the vitriol that the proletariat had for the bourgeois, from the oppressed and the oppressor, and that was a new form of morality and ethics. If it was good for the oppressed, then it was good. If it's bad for the oppressor, it's good.
Mhm.
And so all dynamics, even to use the word in the intersectionality, does in fact, or is in fact, how that's going to go is predicted by the oppressor versus oppressed mental model. So I have learned from ghostwriting for so many people of different nationalities, races, backgrounds, educational attainment levels, industries, religions, even, that the most useful worldviews are those with the best predictive powers. Like, what's going to happen next and what should we do about it? So it's less about labels and terms and defining them, and more about, well, what's actually going to happen and what do we need to do about it in a
Excellent.
unified, resolute fashion. And there was something that you said that reminded me of one of the quotes we pull from Alexander Solzhenitsyn towards the very end. And he was lamenting how during the October Revolution, where there was a lot of blood on the streets. This is the Russian Revolution period. He lamented how the common man waited in terror for the secret police of the Bolsheviks to show up at their front door, treasuring his last few minutes with his wife and children, knowing that he would never get to see her, never get to hold her, never get to kiss her again, and also knowing that his little children would grow up without a father, if they ever got to grow up at all. And then the police came, they took him away, and he was never seen or heard from again. And Solzhenitsyn lamented, what would have happened if one man of the thousands said no? What if the terror that the Russians felt, what if they had a little bit of reciprocity? And all it took, Solzhenitsyn said, all it would have taken was when the pistols came out from the Bolsheviks and said, you're coming with us. What if the pistols were met with a rifle? Solzhenitsyn said the tables would have turned and it would have been the Bolsheviks who ran in terror or who cringed in terror. And it would be they who thought, if I go out tonight to arrest enemies of the state, I might not see my wife and children again. What destroys communism is using their own playbook against them. It's reciprocity. Now, we are not seeing a violent militarized communist revolution in the West. So I'm clearly stating we do not need violence or law breaking in order to win. What we do need are deep knowledge of the tactics that they use to subvert, divide, and conquer, so that we may subvert, divide, and conquer them first.
I agree, definitely. Guys, we have Joshua for about 20 more minutes with us, and hopefully we'll get him to come back sometime and spend even some more time with us. But I do have a couple of questions, and I want to encourage everyone to get their questions in if we have them. From Naruto, when we watch the socialist left, we have found they used white and capitalism interchangeably. Have you seen this while researching for the book?
Yes, while researching it, specifically in the section on the civil rights era and the fact that civil rights era legislation upturned the United States Constitution. The 1960s are effectively the new American founding, and we call it this. To the left, this is when we became a real country of good people, where the oppressors finally had their turn. By the way, that is a quote in English from one of the French revolutionaries who is said to have operated the guillotine. He specifically said,
Wow.
it's time, it's something to the effect of, we the poor have had it so poor for so long. It's time the rich have a turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that oppressor versus oppressed, that unhuman mentality that we resent you, therefore we have the right to rob and or kill. By the way, that is communism is the manifestation. It is the rollout of that concept that you have more than I do. That's not fair. I should have it.
Mm-hmm.
That is anti-civilization. That is unhumanity, that state of being. Therefore, in order to do that, you have to get people riled up on your side. And we walk through how communists, leftists, socialists, etc., how they separate the oppressed from the oppressor in a society, how they organize, because the left is very good at organizing, but they're not good at staying organized. And we talk about the issue there, as well as some of the benefits of that. Using their own weakness against them, the Achilles heel of an inability to stay organized, because they're so effective at robbing and killing. What do? We call it the Ouroboros option. But that being said, white and capitalism, we do talk about the sort of, people like to call it gay race communism. We touched on that a little bit. So it's also called cultural Marxism. But this idea that where in the past it was largely capitalists, and now it's the whites, it's Christians, it's the religious people, it's, pick your oppressor category. It does change, but you're correct that when they do say white, they do often mean capitalist, or when they say capitalist or whiteness, they effectively mean that. And it really is about a hatred of capitalism, which is, you have more stuff materially than I do. That's not fair. I should have some. And
Yeah.
that is it should be fair. There's lots of shoulds in the unhuman mindset.
Yeah.
Should. That's not fair. And fair comes up a lot consistently throughout all of these revolutions. In fact, disparate impact. Want to talk about race politics?
Sure.
Disparate impact. 1920s, 100 years ago, Mao Zedong, a community organizer in rural China, he ran the numbers at his time, and he calculated that the percentage of the population, that the peasantry that owned land, was significantly lower than it should have been, and that it was unfair that the vast majority of the land was owned by the slim minority. So what did they do? He gathered up some angry peasants, and they went house to house, and they tortured landowners to death 100 years ago, because that was fair.
Yeah. And we're seeing that now too with the squatters' rights, which all comes from this same ideology of people shouldn't own houses, people shouldn't own land, every resource should belong to everyone else. And I think the distinction there is very clear. One of the things that we've really dug into quite heavily on my channel is, I think people harp too much on this idea that, well, and I understand why they do it, that capitalism is just about like an economic theory, like you said. But when we listen to leftist trainings, they have a lot of different words that specifically mean capitalism. And we have them on video several different times saying that parental rights are a form of capitalism. They're a form of private property that would be abolished under Marxism. And this is, to me, one of the most important things that I do think that people, especially parents with school-age children, need to be aware of. Because if people understand that parental rights are something they want to abolish as private property, that starts to explain why all of these schools have policies on the books where they're going around parents in order to change the gender and pronouns and names of children in schools, why you're seeing all these articles pop up in newspapers, do parental rights really matter? Why there was a symposium at the University of Connecticut Law School about a year ago where they were specifically saying, are parental rights in the best interest of the child? And all of that sounds crazy until you understand that parental rights are a form of private property.
It is in the Communist Manifesto, published 1848. It specifically says that the affinity parents have for their children and the children for the parents, and that bond stands in the way of the revolution and the overthrow of the bourgeois class, and that there cannot be a utopia without the elimination of parents as the primary caregivers and decision makers over their children. So often people think, that was the past. Well, this is an example of the past being the present and the future. Again, that sort of predictive model. And in one way, shape, or form, every communist revolution has meant to alienate families one from another, to unhuman them. So unhumans is, again, both a noun and it's a verb. We as people, we are what we do. And if you attempt to unhuman someone, then guess what you are now, friend?
Mm-hmm.
So there's much that needs to be done. And looking at the next question from Kino Reviews, are we past the point of no return, or can we still course correct? There's a number of levels, obviously, in a vast civilization, a global scale as ours. There's levels, and let's say zooms. We'll call them. They're zooming out to the Western civilization, zooming in all the way to the person who left that comment, Kino Reviews, and to each and every one of us. There are specific things that we talk about in the book that individuals can do to operationally prepare their environment to resist the micro revolution, the micro uprising, the micro revolt of communists, Leninists, socialists, Marxists, leftists, progressives, the mob, whatever ist, the genderqueer theorists and critical race professors, whatever you want to call them. How do you stand firm against the mob? How do you without resorting to the level of the inhumans and robbing and killing, how do you stand at the doorway when the Bolsheviks come with their pistols and you with a rifle and you say no and you make them be the ones who are afraid? How specifically can you do that without breaking the law, without robbing, without killing? What does that look like for each and every one of us? So each as individuals, we may not each of us be past the point of no return because there are things that we can do as individuals. And we talk about that there are things that local officials can do, understanding the oppressor versus oppressed mental model that has existed for more than 250 years. And we even go back and look at 2,000 years ago and then 4,000 years ago at the dawn of civilization itself, organized civilizations at scale, and how civilization distanced itself from anti-civilization through law and order. And we find ourselves needing to have a little bit of remedial teaching on that. So there are counties, cities, villages, states, provinces, boroughs, parishes that are able to pull back from the point of no return. But institutional infiltration takes decades. Especially when they're dual power institution, which was a Lenin doctrine, which was while you're trying to infiltrate the actual government, education, media, you need to set up your own parallel institutions just in case. You can't. And then the one can overtake the other, or they can merge together, and they call it dual power scenario. And you see the left doing this quite a bit, where the let's say just the LGBTQIA plus organizations coming up, advocacy, while also taking over school boards and the teachers unions and the American Library Association and whatnot. That's an example of dual power. So the parent who doesn't want little Johnny in a dress, it's probably a little too late for that. It's going to take decades to unwind it, which is why, what can you do? You can homeschool, you can private school, you can pod school, you can unschool. There's innumerable things that you do, but that's too expensive, Joshua. Well, how important are the family jewels?
Exactly.
Because lots of teachers want them off your child. So, okay, good little conservative. There are trade-offs. You do not get to have everything that you want.
Yeah.
And you think about the image of the father with the wife and the children, knowing he's never going to see them again. And he accepts his fate. And Solzhenitsyn said, what if one man, just one, said no? Is it worth it to be able to afford that nice new car and have two cars instead of just one? That's a decision that the public needs to make. And I hope they make the right one.
Well, and I think, like, I believe I heard that one of the tactics that you guys suggest is engaging in lawfare. And I'm so glad you guys put that in there, because I have a friend. She's her name is Gabrielle Clark. She runs an amazing consultancy and coaching company called Affirming Reality, and she specifically works with parents whose kids have been taken in by gender ideology in the schools. And the problem is so much more massive than people think. And one of the things she does is she tries to get these parents lawyers. She helps them she tries to encourage them to sue schools, and she has such a hard time getting she's in Texas. She has such a hard time getting parents in Texas to sue the schools when the schools are teaching their kids critical race theory, when they're teaching gender ideology. And she knows a thing or two about this. She filed the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in schools. So she's been down that road and knows what to do. But like conservatives believe that lawsuits and lawfare is like a liberal lefty tactic, and they don't want to engage in it. But you're telling them this is something that you have to do.
Yes. So the reason for this, so I grew up in evangelical Christian community, 99.5% Republican. Everybody's conservative, of course. And in that community, I've talked about this on Jack's show, that there's a strange little martyrdom fetish. I'll say that again, a martyrdom fetish that Republicans, conservatives, and evangelicals all seem to share some affinity for, some interest in. And it's this idea that there is sacred glory in losing everything.
True.
And it goes back to this belief from the New Testament of the Bible that so this does derive from an interpretation of Christian history. We'll call it that. there's this idea that the persecution of the church is what grows the church, and we want to evangelize, we want to be more, so persecution is a good thing. And so if you are having lawfare waged against you, that's a good thing. And it's sort of twisting the words of Jesus Christ, this idea that you will be hated because of me. So we're supposed to be the ones who are hated. We're supposed to be the ones who are attacked. And that's a good sign. We don't do the attacking. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh. That would be like us being the Romans. Like, what if the roles were reversed? We're supposed to be the ones who are fed to the lions, not the Romans sending them in there. And that is the unconscious starting point for all conversations around the clash of civilization and anti-civilization. So that is who is leading the institutional right.
Yep.
People with either that actual martyrdom fetish, or where the best Christian is the one who dies for their faith, or loses, blessed be those who lose their life and for my name, for they should be the ones who find it, Jesus said, right? And so that teaching is then twisted into socio-political viewpoints and calls to action or lack thereof. The result being actual influencers on the right will say things like, when they go low, we go high. We're better than this.
Mm-hmm.
We're the ones who turn the other cheek. This sort of Christianized, I would say it's like pseudo-Christian language that prevents the right from being successful and also from thinking through an issue in some way. It's my viewpoint that on issues associated with gay rights, the right really dropped the ball.
Oh gosh,
Really
it's
dropped the ball.
bad.
Because there was, in fact, a fantastic case to be made for civil, not religious, but civil marriage equality, specifically because the power of attorney problem that many gay couples in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so forth were dealing with. And there was a powerful case to be made there. And that issue was entirely handed over to not the left, but to the far left, because they are the ones who had the oppressor versus oppressed mental model. So now the result, the direct consequence of the Christian right botching that issue, the direct result of that is teaching LGBTQIA history in schools is having children read books that have illustrated depictions of gay sex.
Mm-hmm.
There is a direct result all the way back to the Christian martyrdom fetish. We're supposed to be the ones who are getting eaten by lions in the arena. That's how we be the holiest Christians we possibly can. And this is in scriptural commentaries. This is what the vast majority of Protestant Christians believe and teach, and their preachers do. But when you apply that, you get perpetual losses. You get a refusal to win. And the point about lawfare is that it's reciprocity. The most ancient code of law in the world is as it's recorded, is the code of Hammurabi. And it is reciprocity. An eye for an eye. So then Christians, because of the martyrdom fetish and this belief that the best Christian I can be is one who gets eaten alive, me and my family whole, by the secular people, the Romans, the pagans, the heathens, and then insert the modern equivalent of that, the critical race, the gays, the whatever, pick your Roman centurion, your Nero stand-in, right? Like that's a good thing from that perspective. And it's hypnotized into tens of millions of Americans. What the result is well, we can't defend ourselves. We can't, because that's not Christian. So what you say in the book is don't necessarily do anything illegal, but do a little Hammurabi. The famous Gandhi quote is, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. That's not correct. An eye for an eye keeps would-be eye gougers from taking your eye for fear of losing their own.
Mm-hmm.
That is, by the way, and that, of course, is in the book. And we point out that the way to keep lawfare from being waged against you is what Solzhenitsyn recommended, which was being more than ready and more than willing to wage it right back at those who would come after you. And so this is part of the operational preparation of your environment. In what ways are you exposed, potentially, to the Bolshevik patrols at your front door? metaphorically speaking, for the present day. And what does it look like to be ready with a greater show of force than what they come with? Again, no robbing, no killing, no law breaking here, because this is a gray zone warfare, meaning it's not literally pew, 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 armies and guns and shooting and battles. It's a total war of information warfare, cyber warfare, economic warfare, cultural warfare, educational warfare. And one way to win without fighting is to get your kids out of public schools and to advocate for those things that weaken the power of the communists who want your kids. It's literally what they do. It's entropy. If you think about it, if you drop out of let's switch let's say frames from religious to biological. The biological imperative of a living organism is to reproduce and to help the survival and reproduction of the next generation. And so for humans, to be human is to do that. To be unhuman is to actively prevent that. And so all transitioning of kids, which is not really where that's another fake. You don't actually transition. They're castrated, they're mutilated, they're poisoned. Like call it what it is. And when you do that, the left just loses their minds because they can't stand going from word thinking to critical thinking, right? We do talk about this in the book that if we just change it, we're not going to call it partial birth abortion. We call it women's health, reproductive rights.
Yep, reproductive
You're
justice.
you're against reproductive rights. You bigot, sexist, and so that works every time. Because it goes right into the Christian's martyrdom fetish, which is, we're going to go back into the arena. I'm sorry. We're going to leave the stands and get back into the arena. You send the lions out for us now, because that's the starting point. That's the default. That's what it means to be a good Christian.
Yeah.
Someone asked here.
I was going to bring up the last question, and this is like this. This has been our experience. What point have you found more pushback against? Whether is it from Marxists or people on the far right? How do you address that pushback in general? Just to kind of frame this. We watch far left socialists on the internet. And my community gets significantly more pushback from the conservative right than we do from the left. In fact, the left is actually starting to come talk to us right now because they actually like that we're finding conversations in communists that they had never even heard of. So they come to watch my channel to figure out who's doing what. But like, what is your experience been like with this? What points are people pushing back on?
There was an initial pushback from the left, and I mentioned the SPLC and their minions. So you're dehumanizing us, for wanting to rob and kill. That's not literally exactly what happened, but we define what unhumans are and what unhumans do, and they immediately identified, so you're talking about us. Well, no, but okay. And then right after that, the one whom I gently call James Take the L announced, so you're dehumanizing all liberals, all classical liberals.
Oh, yeah, okay, James.
And I said, no, we're specifically referring to communist revolutionaries who unhuman, meaning they remove rights to life, liberty, and property from those they deem oppressors. That was my gentle reply. He immediately blocked me.
Oh, yeah. He does that to everyone.
Yes. So I would call someone like James the pseudo-right. The pseudo-right seems to align parasitically with the Christianized right. That is that right that has the martyrdom fetish. We're supposed to be the ones in the arena getting eaten because that's holy. We're not supposed to be the Romans. No, oh no, definitely not a guard. Definitely not Nero. Oh no, that's not us. We'll go back into the arena, guys. I'm so sorry. The pseudo right gets to play both sides because they can be morally superior by being the martyr when it's convenient and profitable. And then when it's not profitable, they can quietly leave and go up into the stands and wait it out and say, actually, yeah, it's okay if those Christians get eaten. Those are the wrong kind of Christians, So the pseudo right is a dangerous time. You get lots of pushback. A character by the name of Michael O'Fallon attacked myself and Jack Posobiec out of absolutely nowhere. More than a week ago, I challenged him to a public debate, and he's not tweeted since that day.
Yep, because they can't. James does this all the time. James will intellectually attack my character. He tweets horror. He says I have a personality disorder, all this stuff. Has James been able to answer any of the intellectual criticisms that I've made of his work? No, not a single one of them. And that's the game that they're playing. And I just think it's too bad because, I look at James as someone that I actually used to really respect. And he taught me a lot 4 years ago when I was first starting to get into this stuff. And what I see now is James is like the Pied Piper that's leading all these parents off a cliff by not being honest with them about what's going on. And I think the reason that my community probably responded to what you and Jack are doing so much is not just that you guys were fighting with the same people we were fighting with, but that you seem to have put something together that is actually actionable and practical and hinged into reality, which is the most important thing to us. Because if we can't be honest about the enemy that we're facing, we have no chance of defeating them.
Yes, and what is it that we want? We want to curb stomp the unhumans. We want to launch unhumans into the sun. No, not necessarily. We want to be gentle as much as we can be, and of course stay within the bounds of the law, because the unhumans say, well, we are the law, right? Which is obviously problematic, and it's why atheists and agnostics generally tend to. Well, I mean, it's why communism is inherently atheistic, is because there cannot be an outside lawgiver. There cannot be anything transcendent, because the oppressed is the transcendent. If there is any transcendent or metaphorical truth, metaphysicality, it is the state of the oppressed. And that is the moral framework, the moral compass. If it's good for them, it's good. If it's bad for them, it's bad. And if it's bad for the oppressor, it's good. Then. And this is why you see the elimination of religion in public life. But to get back to answer the question, we get a lot of pushback from the left, of course, because when they hear about our description of unhumans, they say you're talking about us because we want to rob and kill. A little bit of exaggeration, but it's directionally accurate. And then from the pseudo right, who accuse us of being Christo-fascists, Michael O'Fallon says that I want to be a Christian nationalist and like outlaw democracy or something like that. I of course didn't say that, and when I corrected him, he said, "No, you don't get it. You're a Christo-fascist, Joshua.
Yeah,
You're
they have this secret knowledge."
Yes, I said. No, I'm not. Like, I don't say that. And he said, no, you want to have a Franco of Spain, but in the USA, you want an American Caesar. You want an empire. So a lot of the conversation with the pseudo right is, this is what you want. This is what you want. I know it. This is they're blowing these secret dog whistles to one another, and it's us being accused who can't hear it, which is always a lot of fun. But from the actual far right, now of course I'm far right, alt-right, radical extremist or whatever, just like Jack is, because if you're further right than someone who wants to abolish parenthood, you're far right. Okay, but the actual far right, I never engage with them. I never respond to any of their stuff because they're consistently, constantly, and continuously talking about Jews in my notification, my mentions.
They're a little obsessed to a distracting degree.
Yes, and it's not obvious to me that the French revolutionaries were Jewish. It's not obvious to me that the Cambodians, the Khmer Rouge, were Jewish. It's not obvious to me that Castro was Jewish or that Allende was Jewish. And so then this obsession seems to break down. I will point out that Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering's memoir called Germany Reborn is a useful book to study because it helps you understand why the actual reactionary right, the far right, not the reciprocal right, but the reactionary right, why they equate communism with Judaism, why they equate communists and Marxists with Jews. Why do they do that? Hermann Goering's memoir, published at the very beginning of the National Socialist rule in Germany, is useful to understand why they do that. And it worked then. Unfortunately, it worked. And you had a successful resistance to communism. So most people don't know that during the Weimar Republic, there was a communist uprising in Germany.
Yep. Hitler was fighting communists when he first took power.
Yes. From a reactionary perspective, which is something like, so reciprocity, the idea is atomic diplomacy, which kept the United States and the Soviet Union from nuclear war. The communists were concerned about getting blown up by a nuclear bomb, so they resisted. That is atomic diplomacy. That is reciprocity. The reactionary right, the Hermann Goering message was something to the effect of, because these communist leaders are known European Jews, therefore all Jews are communists.
Yeah.
Therefore, to defeat communists, we have to defeat Judaism in this country. That was the reactionary message that unfortunately had a fertile audience at that time of being reactionary. The goal wasn't to save the people; it was to get revenge. Our goal is we don't need revenge, because in the case of the United States, the objective is not to discriminate against someone for immutable or mutable characteristics necessarily. The goal is to stay as far away from entropy as possible, to prevent the unhumaning and the anti-civilizing of our society. And the reactionary says, let's just flip the whole table over. If I have one bullet, I'll shoot myself first if it hurts you. That's what the reactionary says. And that's exactly what happened in Germany, right? They defeated the communists, sort of, and also defeated their entire empire. That is where reactionary politics goes. That is the actual, from my perspective, that is the actual annoying far right.
Yeah.
They don't have anywhere near the power that the far left claims that they do, though. It's a bunch of 17-year-olds with goofy cat photos and anime names.
If I can give you just a little bit of hope on that one. So I actually do it, I'm kind of like quasi friends with Nick Fuentes, and we get along, and he's invited me to his AFPAC thing. So I'm actually going to be in Detroit at the same time that you guys are for your book launch. And so I've actually interacted quite a bit with the Groypers. And one of the reasons that I'm doing it is not that I hate Jews at all. I don't care if people are Jewish, but like I've actually been successful at getting some of the Groypers to watch the actual Marxist trainings, and, you know, kind of slowly bringing them along, because I agree with you that I think this obsession on everything is Jewish is a distraction from what the actual enemy is. And I have had some success with getting them to just temper it a little bit, at least temporarily. Now, as you say, a lot of them are very young, but I think that, you know, one of the reasons that one of the things that I do like about them is that they have a lot of spirit. You have to give them that. They have a lot of energy. They cause a lot of problems. And if we can just focus that energy on a more productive target, I kind of feel like there could be a win there. Maybe I'm just, you know, it's a fool's errand, but I'm trying, and I do see hope in some of them. So maybe that'll give you guys a little bit of hope as well. But Joshua, I know we are over time, and I just really appreciate you coming out today. Nick says that maybe we should read this book for book club. Yeah, we are actually just talking about having a summer reading book club. And so this sounds like the perfect book for that. And again, guys, the book is called Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions. I did put a link in the description on this video, and you can find it at Unhumans Book. Joshua, do you want to say anything else before we kind of wrap it up for the day?
Oh, I appreciate that last reframe about Nick and the Groypers. I posted recently that I still don't know what a Groyper is, and at this point, I'm too embarrassed to ask.
It has to do with a 4chan thing, and it's the frog essentially, and like they explained it to me at one point, but
yes. But I think the lesson there, or the useful reframe, is just because the left hates it doesn't mean it's good. Yeah. That's what reactionary politics are of any degree, whether it's online social media or from a government perspective in the 1920s and 30s and in Germany. Having our own moral framework. So like life, liberty, property, the protection of those rights, those human rights, as those we believe God-given, God-ordained rights. From our perspective, that's a moral compass, and that's open to everybody, regardless of the race or ethnicity, from our perspective. And civilization is what protects those. And the unhumans are those who threaten it, regardless of who they are, across time, space, and race.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Joshua, again, thank you for coming out. Fascinating conversation. And maybe if we do this book club, will you come back and talk to us again?
I'd love to. Sure thing.
Awesome. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. So we're going to wrap it up for right now. I may be streaming a little later on tonight, so keep an eye out on my Twitter. I'll post more information about that. But for now, guys, I'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care. We'll see you soon.